Okay, we're back to the second part of intelligence. Yay! Okay, so we're going to start with how did we assess intelligence? Okay, and it all started with Alfred Binet. So we're going to do kind of the same thing, not leave too much space when it comes here because there's really not a lot of examples, just kind of straight information and really hard to apply it to our daily life. Okay, so it first started with this guy named Alfred Binet. So Alfred Binet, in writing this down, is he was basically he wasn't from France, and he created a scale to test for students in France that needed extra support. So he's going to make this test to identify students that were having difficulties or needed extra help. Okay, and he developed what's called mental age. Okay, and mental age, definitely need to know what that means, which is the person's ability to reason at the level of somebody that is typically that chronological age. Okay, so for example, so make sure to pause, write that all down. And so what that means is basically, if let's say you tell me that my mental age is of an 8-year-old, then that means that I am going to think like an 8-year-old, how an 8-year-old um, processes information, how they problem solve, how they understand things. So, for instance, if a child that is 8 years old, let's say, and that their mental age is of like somebody that's 12 years old, right? They obviously can do a lot more problem solving, being able to do certain skills that a 12-year-old can cognitively do. Okay, so that is mental age. Um, now, there was this guy named, and this one you kind of have to write it under Alfred Binet because he's like a US version of Alfred Binet, and his name is Louis Thurman. Okay, and he's going to get Binet's scale that he used in France, and then he's going to bring it to the US and kind of test it for people in the US. And he called this test what's called Stanford Binet. Okay, and still actually used today, it's still out there. Um, of and this is the original test. Now, this one, it tests 4 areas of cognitive abilities that you also need to know, so make sure to write that down. And the first one is going to be verbal reasoning. Okay, so verbal reasoning is understanding words and how to use them. Okay, so that's one. Two, again, we're writing this down. Two is abstract slash visual reasoning. So abstract visual reasoning is, can we form mental pictures in our head and problem solve there as well? Next one is what's called quantitative, and I will write it here, so just in case the spelling is a problem, but quantitative reasoning is using numbers and measurements. And then the last one is going to be short-term memory. Can you process information that was just taught to you, right? Like kind of like what we did, that short-term memory test of how long we could keep certain things, like the letters. That's not what you get, but it's something very similar to that. Okay. And then Louis Thurman created from this whole mental age thing what's called the intelligence quotient. Okay. Which is how we get that whole word of IQ comes from this word. Okay. That he kind of invented. And this was what, well, actually, it was, okay, now am I looking at my notes? It's like not Thurman, but it was this guy, William Stern. Okay, so maybe write that down. William Stern. Not sure how much they're gonna get to these words, but for sure, like the test, like Stanford Binet is definitely one. Alfred Binet is a big, like head important person in IQ. So this guy, William Stern, created this, like how to get your IQ was using your mental age. So it was a formula, your mental age over your chronological age, right? Chronological age. Okay, figure that out. That's not what that says, but you know. If you're listening to me, you know what it says. Chronological age times 100, and they said this would give you your IQ. Okay, now to be honest with you, this formula, they do not use this as much really now. So they have different formulas, a lot more statistical methods of doing that. Okay, but what they came out with this was that the average IQ is what we know as 85 to 115, which the mean is 100, and this score right here is one standard deviation away from the norm. Okay, now under this one, you need to know that there are new ways of testing, like more modern. So these are modern tests that they used for different types of intelligence. And the first one is going to be achievement test. Achievement test is what you guys probably see a lot more and have experience, and these are basically anything that you've learned. So your AP exam, right? That's a good example, write that down. Your AP exam at the end in May is going to be an achievement test because it's going to measure what you've learned. Okay, just like your state test, um, things along those natures, right? Like a unit test will be an achievement test. Kind of sees what you learned. Now, the second type is what's called an aptitude test, which is another one that you guys have also been exposed to. And this exam, an aptitude test, definitely need to know, is it predicts your ability to learn a new skill. Okay, so this, it kind of is like a prediction of how you're going to do in the future for that specific skill. So for example, college entrance exams, your SATs are all aptitude. The GRE, right? So your LSAT, things like that are going to be an aptitude test. All right. Because they've seen through research that these things, there is a correlation between an aptitude, how you do on the aptitude, and your success in whatever that skill that they need you to do. Okay, the next one is what's called, and this one's a little bit longer. I'm just gonna actually put the name of the actual guy that started these different tests, because he actually has two types of tests, and this is David Wechsler, and he has what is called the Wechsler, and this is probably one that some students have seen. He has the adult intelligence scale, which is called the WAS, the WAIS, it's with an A. This one measures intelligence, but for adults, okay? And then he's going to have the WISC, which is for the kids, okay? Which is basically the Wechsler intelligence scale for children. Write that all down. I'm not gonna write it for you because this video will take too long, and then you guys are gonna complain about the video being too long. Yeah. Okay. So this one, the reason why this one's used most often, and this is probably if you aren't gifted, this is the test that they gave you. And it's kind of composed into three. It doesn't just give you one general intelligence like Spearman. This one is actually going to give you three. So it's going to give you verbal, right? Your verbal scale. They're going to give you the non-verbal scale. And then they're going to give you like the full scale. Okay, now go back to these so I could tell you what I want you to write next to these things. So verbal scale kind of measures your language, reasoning, and memory skills. Okay, so they actually use factor analysis with these tests. And what they'll do is they'll give you a bunch of little activities or little tests for language. They'll give you a bunch of tests for reasoning and a bunch of tests for memory skills. They'll cluster them all together, right? And then they'll give you the scale or your score for verbal scale. Then non-verbal scale is there. We're going to use spatial relations, okay, which are puzzles, sequencing, and problem solving. Okay, so make sure you include that as well. And then basically the full scale is a combination of the two scores together. For this one, they use standard deviations. There's more statistical reasoning behind it. Okay, so that's basically the more modern ones for assessing intelligence. Okay, then we're going to go to another kind of like subtopic, and this one is going to be the different principles of testing. So these are principles of test constructions. Before you can create, right, this intelligence test, you actually needs to have some standards and needs to like meet some criteria. One of the first one, it needs to be standardized, okay, which is standardization. Very important. And this one is basically to evaluate your performance, right? We're writing this down all here under standardization. There's going to be a few notes. Is you need to evaluate your performance compared to other people's performance as well. Okay, so it's kind of like a standard. So for this one, standardization means using a uniform testing procedure, right? So it's a uniform testing procedure with and meaningful scores by comparing the performance of pre-tested group. Okay, so write that again. It's a uniform testing procedures, right? Like it's like their operational definition is super specific, step by step, reading from a script, right? And then having scores, meaningful scores that you can compare to the pre-tested group, right? Like kind of your sample that you used, or your representative sample that you're comparing it to, okay? Now, for standardization, there must be a normal curve, right? So if it's standardized, the results must be a normal curve, and basically the average score is going to be 100. So remember that lovely little bell curve thing that we have seen a bunch of times. I actually would like for you guys to leave a little space here, would be great, so that we can, work with this. But it's the same, it's kind of the same thing that we've always been talking about, that the mean is the 100 right in the middle, it's distributed equally, and the standard deviations is 15 points. So this one would be 85, this one would be 115, and as we go further, right, we have I'm hoping that these are the numbers that are correct. It's a little late. I'm a little tired. Probably not. Okay, anyway, but remember that the one standard deviation, right, is where most of the scores will be. It's 68% happens here with one standard deviation. Okay. Now, under standardization, please note that they must use a representative sample of people. Okay, so representative sample of the population. So for instance, for the IQ test that they give now, in order for them to get these scores and make sure that it is distributed, it is standardized, they have to get the representative sample from all of the population. So they have to get everybody, people from different regions, right? Also from different backgrounds, from different social economic status, which goes into where the conflict is with these standardized tests, okay? And just like when you guys take your AP test for psych, it's a standardized test. That's why there's like and just like SAT as well, they're all standardized in the sense of like the procedures, right? They have to read from a book. There's a certain time they need to take it, a certain location. There's rules, right, for them, for you to follow. So that's standardized. Now, second one is going to be reliable. Is it the reliability? They're always going to test reliability, and this is that the results, write this down, the results are consistent. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, pause here. Don't write anything because Miss Amana is reading this, because I always get confused with reliability and with validity. So this is where, and hold on a second. Okay, I'm back. But it's like if I didn't even leave. But yes, here I am. Okay, so reliability is when the test is going to give you the same results every single time. So when you retest and do the retest over and over again, it's going to be reliable in the sense that it's going to continue to give you the same score. So for instance, for a IQ test, they are reliable because even if you take if you take an IQ when you were, let's say, 6 years old, and you take one when you're 20 something, it might go up a little bit, but it only will be like one standard, like it will stay in the standard deviation. It's not gonna jump like three standard deviations, okay? Because it is reliable. It's going to give you the same results every time. So I always think of a friend that is reliable. They are consistent. They're always there. Okay, so it's a good way to remember because they definitely always ask about reliability. Validity is the other one. And this is basically, is it testing what it's supposed to test? Okay, so validity is it valid? Is it testing what it is? So when we have our Unit 5 test, is it going to be valid? The exam is, am I testing you what you're supposed to do? Okay, so that is going to be a validity. Now, there's different types of validity, and we're actually going to go a little bit into that in class, but just write it down for now. Some main ones, which is content validity, which is basically, is it testing um, the content of of the skill that needs to be applied. Okay, so is it testing what the skill that needs to be applied? Good example will be your driving test. Your driving test, right? Your road test for your driver's license, you're gonna go take a test, and hopefully that content validity, right, is going to be able to tell us how you're gonna do in the future while you're driving. Okay, and then the other one is going to be predictive validity, which is just is it going to predict your behavior for like the future, for what you need. So for instance, like aptitude test or your SATs, like it tells you how you're going to perform in the future. So for IQ, they're predictive validity because if you have a high IQ, it kind of will tell you how you're going to process information and understand it. Okay? And that's basically it for the different types of assessing intelligence.